Today we're going to demonstrate the Plaque Assay. We're going to begin by talking about how to use the pipetter. When you press the plunger on the pipetter, you'll notice that the pipetter stops you. This is how far you want to press the plunger when you want to bring liquid into the pipetter. When you want to expel liquid from the pipetter, press your thumb past that all the way down and leave your thumb pressed until after you pull the pipette tip out of the liquid. When you want to get the pipette tip off, just press the button by your thumb. Now we're going to demonstrate making serial dilutions of the T4 phage. Transfer 0.1 mil of the T4 phage into the tube you labeled 1 to 100. Mix the broth using a sterile transfer pipette. Transfer 0.1 mil of the 1 to 100 dilution into the tube you labeled 1 to 10,000. Mix the broth with a sterile transfer pipette. Transfer 1 mil of the 1 to 10,000 dilution into the tube you labeled 1 to 100,000. Mix the broth with a sterile transfer pipette. Transfer 1 mil of the broth you labeled 1 to 100,000 into the broth you labeled 1 to 1,000,000. Mix the broth with a sterile transfer pipette. Transfer 1 mil of the broth you labeled 1 to 1,000,000 into the broth you labeled 1 to 10,000,000. Mix the broth with a sterile transfer pipette. Now we're going to mix the bacteriophage dilutions with E. coli. Pipette 1/10 of a mil of E. coli into the microcentrifuge tubes that you labeled with the same dilutions using the same pipette tip. Using a different pipette tip for each transfer, pipette 1/10 of a mil of each of the phage dilutions into the corresponding microcentrifuge tube of E. coli. So put 1/10 of a mil of the 1 to 100 phage dilution into the tube of E. coli labeled 1 to 100. After you've pipetted all of the dilutions into the tubes, you're going to rotate the tubes in your palms and then let them incubate at room temperature for 5 minutes. Now we're going to demonstrate plating the phage E. coli mixture. Transfer the contents of the phage E. coli mixture with a sterile transfer pipette into the melted top agar and give it a gentle mix. Then pour the contents onto the corresponding Luria agar plate. Quickly swirl it so that it spreads over the surface of the Luria agar plate. Avoid producing bubbles because they can affect your results.